Hi, and welcome to Voices of Esalen. I'm your host, Sam Stern. Today our guest is Julie Szabo, and she's talking about a conference called Web of Change. Julie and I talked a lot about what it means to be an agent of social change in this day and age, and continued the discussion that was raised in last week's podcast with Aaron Pereira of the Wellbeing Project, which is basically the necessity of nurturing the actual person doing the social change so the social change can be effective. Imagine that. Julie was a real pleasure to talk to. We got into a host of topics, including alienation on the web and in real life, the death of clickbait and a return to long form as it relates to storytelling, racial diversity in social change, racial justice as a possible solution to climate change. I was really inspired by her thoughts on the action that she's curating with the Web of Change. So with no further ado, here's our conversation with Julie Szabo. I wanted to start off just by asking you, what are the roots of Web of Change? How did it first come into being?
So Web of Change has had kind of a long evolution, not Esalen long, but the first conference for Web of Change was 14 years ago, and it has been up until the last 3 years. It has always been at Hollyhock Retreat Center on Cortez Island, which is definitely a sister location to Esalen, and it really started out as a small-ish gathering of people who were very, very deep into technology as it relates to social change. And it started out as almost entirely Canadians. Its roots are in Canada, and that's like a special part of its birthing, I think. Mm-hmm. And you know, the people who came to Web of Change at first 14 years ago were people who, I mean, we have to remember this is like pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter, pre-social media. So we were looking a lot at infrastructure, technology infrastructure, how to use the web for campaigning. This is like really early days for this. So a lot of kind of really the most loving possible way to say this, like really geeky, deep love of tech. Over the years, what has been, I think, so special about Web of Change is that we've started to bring together still people who are very, very deeply knowledgeable about tech, people who build important infrastructure that enables campaigning online. And then we bring in on-the-ground organizers, people who actually have to use that technology, and you know, people who are extremely knowledgeable about all kinds of social justice movements, who are leaders in those movements. And so the conversations that we have at Web of Change are about how we can be effective and how we can build better campaigns in the future, and how we can win. So from a purely sort of like tech perspective into a movement building conference, that's really been the evolution of Web of Change.
What are some of the social justice campaigns that are featured this year in Web of Change? It sounds really super fascinating.
Yeah. So one of the things that's special about Web of Change, I think, is that we're bringing together change makers from all kinds of different areas who don't normally talk to each other. You know, like for a long time, the environmental sort of section of activists, you know, wasn't really very interested in racial justice or in immigration.
Right.
And you know, it's when you're deeply invested in one of those communities and your knowledge runs deep, it's hard to kind of figure out how to interface with people who, you know, are deeply invested in their own campaigning and their own issue area. And I think what is unique about Web of Change is that we bring these people together and they can share what works for them. And we can actually start talking about how we can build connections and how we can intersect. So to answer your question, we have some amazing people here this year. We have attendees who are active and have been active in Ferguson over this last year, building important campaigns and communities there. We have someone attending from United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, and of course we're leading up to the big climate change talks in Paris. We have people who are technology specialists who are trying to support, these various different groups and trying to figure out ways that, work that some of the immigration rights people can be, moved over and shared with some of these other environmental and social justice groups. So that's a kind of a smattering of who's here.
How many groups are here?
Oh man, most of the people come independent of their colleagues. So we have 135 people attending, and we probably have 100 different organizations represented. Yeah.
Yeah, fascinating. So how about as an organization, how do you encourage transformation, in your members and in your communities?
So we spend almost equal amounts of time on personal development and professional development. A lot of the people who attend Web of Change work for organizations that are demanding, that are often understaffed. They come to Web of Change tired and burnt out. And one of the things that we realize is that if we're going to do this hard work, we need to nourish ourselves in a way that allows us to do the work. And being burnt out, not knowing how to find the kind of compelling ways to help yourself back into health when you're doing this exhausting work, it isn't helpful to anybody, right? You can't be a change agent if you are burnt out and exhausted. So half of Web of Change is really looking at what it means to be a change agent, what kind of stress and demands that puts on one's life, and how to look after yourself in that way. And then the other portion is a lot about how can we do this better? What are strategies? What are tactics? Let's have a discussion around how we raise funds for our organizations, for our issues areas. So it's kind of the perfect combination of personal transformation and professional, getting a lot of professional juice, to be able to go back to their organizations and say, hey, let's try this. We haven't done that before.
Yeah, I had that thought myself. As just it's a technology conference in many ways, and it's set at a place which is almost profoundly anti-technology. Not anti, but Esalen, I would say, is slow and kind of off the grid. And I'm wondering, how that tension works, whether it's disturbing or whether it's refreshing for your participants.
It's both. It's both. I think it's important because everyone here is so literate on social media, is like super active online. They have a lot of responsibilities that can only be done through email, through Skyping, through all of those things. And so to unplug is it's challenging and it's scary. And there are also, people who have families and thinking, how am I going to talk to my kids for 5 days? But it allows us to have the space to have the conversations we need to have. And that's kind of part of the DNA of Web of Change. Hollyhock is very, very similar to Esalen. I remember the first year we got Wi-Fi and we were like, wow, do we even want this? Like, what's that going to be like? Of course, it turns out you do, but but yeah, I mean, some people have a hard time, and I can see them absolutely like panicked trying to get their email out before the Wi-Fi turns off at dinner time. Just like, am I going to make it? But I think we warn everybody ahead of time. They know that that's what they're getting into, and I feel like by day 3, they're in the groove.
Yeah. How across the years with technology developing so rapidly, and Web of Change has been in existence for 14 years.
Yeah.
How has that changed social change organizations in general?
Well, I would say over the last 3 years probably, there's been a really interesting conversation about how online fits in with activism. And I think the jury is out. A lot of the work we do in our community is online, and it's engagement, it is fundraising, it's trying to build larger communities than we could access where we live. But there's also a very real acknowledgement that when you are trying to gain support for a movement, you need to have relationships with people. And so even though a lot of the conversations are specific to new technologies, we just did a session yesterday called Speed Geek, where folks demo different technologies. And so the group kind of like moves around and sees all this different tech. I mean, that's very tactical. A lot of the discussion is around how do you marry old school, on the ground, event-based, like door-to-door work with the internet, and how do you marry those things in a way that really builds movements more quickly and more efficiently and in a more engaged way. And we don't know, but that's what we're trying to learn.
Yeah. How about what's some of the new tech or the new tools that would be surprising or interesting?
I think data is really, really interesting. For a long time, I think people didn't care enough about the data that they collected when people signed petitions online, when people donate online and give their information to an organization. What does that mean? For a long time, I think organizations didn't really know what to do with that. And it's getting, increasingly sophisticated with how you choose to communicate with your members, how you decide how to segment your lists and message to different lists, and how you decide to slice and dice your data in a way that builds better relationships with people. Because obviously, if you have someone who has given your organization $5 and someone who has given your organization $100,000, you can't communicate with them in the same way. And the way technology can manage your data and manage your relationships can really reinforce the ladder of engagement that progresses appropriately based on the kind of relationship you have with your membership. So, there's lots of I could get into the data tech of how all that works, but I think people are just becoming organizations are becoming so much more sophisticated around that, which ideally means less email spam and better online engagement with people who are want to be supportive of your organization, but probably don't want to be like blasted every week with something that's actually not pertinent to them. So slicing, dicing data. I feel like, social media was a big topic, and lots of conversation about social media engagement. 5 years ago, there's still a lot of conversation about that, but I feel like that has sort of peaked in a way. And just with the way that social media platforms manage their algorithms, and how important monetization has become in terms of, for Facebook, in terms of advertising and whatnot. Things have really changed. Like, for instance, today, Adam Mordecai from Upworthy, which is a really popular site that helps to curate content for social justice issues, he is doing a session called Clickbait is Dead. Clickbait is dead, bow to your new master, Lord Compelling Story. So, he almost single-handedly, along with, folks at BuzzFeed, both Upworthy and BuzzFeed have been instrumental in writing headlines that we call clickbait, right? Like 5 ways to whatever. And that worked really, really well for Upworthy for a long time. And then it stopped working because humans change, because the way we communicate with each other changes, because we got tired of that. And so today's going to talk about how, that's what he was doing for a long time. And then it's changing because people aren't responding. So that's been an interesting evolution. I think everyone thought social media was going to be the secret to total engagement. And actually, we've just become so saturated with information that we're going back to like long form.
What's an example of long form that we're going back to?
I think better storytelling. There's another session going on right now that is about how to engage supporters in your organization or in your mission through better storytelling. And that's just, that's human, right? And I feel like in some ways the last 5 years we've, maybe gone for the quick, easy 140 character tweet, which is still totally valid and has its place. But we're ready for something deeper. We want to be human, and we want to connect. And so new ways of storytelling, I think, is just moving story onto the web. Instead of Tumblrs, we're looking at longer video. I myself work in digital strategy and marketing, and I remember even a year ago saying, well, the video can't be more than 30 seconds. No one will watch it. And then, it's just not true. You look at the Coney 2012 video, and that had, a lot of issues around it for sure. But that was, I can't even remember how long that video was, but I feel like it was 25 minutes. And it was incredibly successful, and it had loads of people watching it, and it was very compelling storytelling. So the way we communicate on the web is changing, and it will always change. I don't know what will be next, but I think right now we want better, more compelling content and better storytelling.
It's fascinating. Well, one thing that we were talking about on our way up here was that this group that you've assembled is easily the most racially diverse, culturally diverse group that Esalen has been here during the year that I've been here. I'm wondering, is that a tenet of Web of Change, or is that sort of just a natural outgrowth of social change in general?
It's definitely a mission for Web of Change, and that's a board-driven mission that over the last 3 years in particular has been really important to us. And This is the most diverse conference we've ever had. 42% of our conference attendees come from diverse communities. And I think last year it was closer to 30. So it's kind of a steady increase. And, it's the recognition that we need to work together. These, different issue areas, social justice, the environment. We're not going to win if we go alone. And, what do they say? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so the intersectionality of progressive movements in North America and beyond, that's where we need to be. And I think having a diverse community and diverse voices from social justice areas that traditionally haven't been at Web of Change is how we're going to grow. It's how we're going to get better, and it's how we're going to make real change.
Are there any of the newer ones that come off the top of your head which would be of interest to check out?
We have attendees from the Black Youth Project 100. We have somebody from the Center for Story-Based Strategy, which kind of ties back in with what I was saying about better storytelling online. We have a really interesting organization. Oh man, we have so many. I'm actually cheating and looking at my list right now, and I'm like,
okay.
Who do I say? We have a group called United for Iran, and One America, who I think probably some of your listeners might know.
What is One America?
It's a group that does work. I'm actually doing a project right now that the Seattle, Washington chapter of One America is involved in, which is it's actually an environmental campaign, but the idea, their portion of, or their participation in it is the idea that if we don't have racial justice as part of the solution to climate change, then it's not going to work. Because the people who are most affected by climate change are people in communities of color and low-income communities and communities that often get left behind. And so the people who cause the least amount of climate change harm really suffer the most, right? So this is where the intersectionality of all different kinds of organizations and racial justice and environment and immigration, and it all kind of connects. So that's why we have to have all these people here. Otherwise, we're missing all kinds of pieces. And also we have quite a few really amazing attendees from also organizations. Man, I'm just going to list off a few, and people might have to look them up because they're so great. But Get Equal is one, and NARAL, of course, NARAL Pro-Choice America, and then we have 350.org, which is an environmental. So you can see, it's way more diverse, not only in having more people from communities of color, but also just all kinds of issues areas. So as you can see, I'm getting kind of excited about talking about that aspect of it. It's really different because 10 years ago, it was almost all enviros, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's been a real change, and there's been a real belief from the core of the organization that we, no matter what the issue area, we got to work together, because the progressive movement, we're not going to win if we aren't supporting one another.
I was thinking I could ask, just to play devil's advocate, what are the limitations of using technology as to affect social change? Does any of that come up?
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge aspect of it. I mean, are you really building relationships and engagement when you're posting to Facebook? I mean, are you? Maybe. Maybe. What does that mean? I mean, that's they're talking about that right now down the hill. For sure they are. So where does the role, where is the humanity in the technologies we use? Technology is just a platform. Social media is just like the phone. How well can we build relationships using these platforms? Mm-hmm. Because we know that relationships are the key to movement building.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think about social media as being a paradox, because it's everything that you want, but it's only the virtual representation.
Yes.
In there.
Yeah.
And I imagine some of what you guys are doing is about how to decrease alienation, but sometimes there's nothing more alienating than being online.
Totally.
And
yeah. I think a actually really beautiful example of how technology enables relationships is from last year's Web of Change. We were at Hollyhock last year, and we had 120 people, and it was just one of those really magical conferences. And the group bonded just incredibly strongly. And so, the day after, one of the attendees started the Facebook group for Web of Change 2014. And because we had this very, very strong bond built over these 5 days, and relationships from the past as well, because lots of alumni come back, this Facebook group was incredible. I've never in my life been involved in a Facebook group like this. People were sharing on such deep levels and reconnecting back, sharing out their work, remembering struggles that other attendees were having and checking back. It was, and actually that group is still pretty active, but it was a real sign to me that relationships first, and then using the technology as a way to re-engage and enable communication. I mean, it just worked. It worked really well. And I think so often we go technology first, relationships second. And I've run a lot of campaigns, and that doesn't always work. In fact, it often doesn't work.
Okay. Well, how do you see Web of Change, or what do you want for Web of Change's future?
I want, and I think the board wants, Web of Change to continue its evolution. It's a place where progressives can come to have hard conversations. It's a place where people who do hard work that doesn't always get rewarded, either with money or with prestige, come to get nurtured. And those are important things, and I think we want to continue to be able to serve our community in that way. We have so much demand for this conference. We had more than 400 applications this year, and that tells us that there's room for growth. So what that looks like, we're kind of starting to build out. We actually did last year our very first what we're calling a local event, so Web of Change Local. We did that in LA, and what that is just a smaller version of Web of Change. In that case, it was an overnight again, we went outside of LA to a place by Big Bear Lake and disconnected. Or, it could also look like, a day long of, intensive sessions. So, finding a way to allow our community that is growing really, really quickly, because every year we're adding so many new people to the Web of Change alumni group. We want to be able to have meaningful relationships with all of those people. And when you have a flagship conference one time a year that has 130 spots, it's challenging. It's really, really challenging.
Yeah.
So building that out may be the next step.
That's great. Well, how can listeners who want to know more about Web of Change find out more?
They can check out our website at webofchange.com and sign up, subscribe to our newsletter. In addition to information about the conference, we also profile people who come to the conference and our alumni. We have a really great job board of nonprofit jobs. So if people are interested in nonprofit jobs, particularly those associated with communications or digital, we have a lot of great stuff there. And we ourselves are, there was talk of doing some sort of podcast, so maybe that might be in the works. So come to our website and see about that.
That's exciting. Well, thank you so much, Julie, for taking the time out to talk with us at Esalen.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Esalen. Today's show is produced in conjunction with Cheryl Franzel, Geraldine Hess, Shannon Hudson. Special thanks goes out to Lori Putnam, our Director of Marketing, who sat in on the interview and assisted with questions. Our music today is by Villela, and the track is called 3 to the 6 to the O. If you want to support Voices of Esalen, just listen to it. Keep listening. That's your job. We so appreciate your presence. I'm your host, Sam Stern, wishing you a peaceful day.